I didn't meet God in a church. I didn't meet him during a worship song. I didn't meet him when my life was working. I didn't meet him when I was strong. I met God when I had absolutely nothing left. No answers, no direction, no confidence, no strength to pretend anymore. I had reached the kind of low that doesn't look dramatic on social media. The kind of low where you still go to work, still reply to messages, still smile in public, but inside, something in you has already collapsed. That night, I wasn't searching for meaning. I wasn't asking big spiritual questions. I wasn't even sure I believed God cared about someone like me. I was just tired of carrying my own life, tired of fixing myself, tired of explaining myself, and tired of waking up every morning with the same quiet fear in my chest that whispered, "This is all your life is ever going to be." I remember sitting there, completely still, completely empty, and thinking something I had never allowed myself to admit before. I cannot save myself. Not with motivation, not with discipline, not with positive thinking, not with another fresh start. For the first time, I stopped trying to be strong, and that was the moment everything changed. Because I didn't climb up to God. I didn't reach him. I didn't find him. God met me, right there, at the lowest point of my life. And what happened in that quiet, ordinary, broken moment changed the way I see God, changed the way I see myself, and changed the way I understand pain forever. I never expected to meet God like this. But maybe this is exactly where he meets us most. My lowest point did not arrive with a single disaster. There was no sudden tragedy, no dramatic collapse, no moment that made people around me say, "Of course you broke." From the outside, my life still looked normal. I was functioning. I was showing up. I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was playing my role well enough that no one questioned it. But inside, I was slowly losing my grip on myself. Every day felt heavier than the one before. Not because my schedule was full, but because my mind never rested. I was constantly thinking, constantly replaying conversations, constantly questioning my decisions, constantly comparing my life to everyone else's progress. I watched people move forward while I felt permanently delayed. New careers, new relationships, new confidence, a new direction. And there I was, still trying to figure out who I was supposed to become. I didn't feel jealous. I felt defective, like I had missed something important that everyone else somehow received. I began to measure my worth by how far behind I thought I was. Behind in success, behind in stability, behind in clarity, behind in purpose. At first, it was just frustration. Then it became self-doubt. Then it quietly turned into something much more dangerous: hopelessness. I stopped expecting good things, not because I was bitter, but because disappointment had trained me not to hope too much. It felt safer to expect less. It hurt less that way. I started telling myself I was being realistic, but deep down I knew I was slowly lowering my expectations for my own life. And I convinced myself I wasn't allowed to dream big anymore, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of failing again. Every mistake I had made felt permanent. Every wrong decision felt irreversible. I kept asking myself the same question in different ways. How did I end up here? And even worse, how do I get out of this version of my life? But I never said those questions out loud. I learned how to hide my confusion very well. I learned how to keep conversations light. I learned how to avoid talking about the future. Because the truth was, I didn't see one anymore. Not a real one. Just an endless cycle of surviving weeks and waiting for motivation that never stayed. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt tired. A deep, quiet, emotional exhaustion that sleep could not fix. Not the kind of tired that makes you stop believing change is possible. The kind of tired that slowly disconnects you from yourself. And without realizing it, my lowest point had already begun. It just didn't look like rock bottom. It looked like normal life, without hope. Looking back now, I can see that my lowest point wasn't created by one big failure. It was created by a long season of silent pressure. Pressure to become someone impressive. Pressure to justify my existence. Pressure to prove that my life actually mattered. I grew up believing that value had to be earned. If you perform well, you matter. If you succeed, you are respected. If you stay strong, you are accepted. So I learned very early how to hide weakness. I learned how to push through exhaustion, how to ignore emotional pain, and how to stay productive even when my heart felt completely empty. I became very good at surviving, but I became very bad at listening to myself. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I told myself I was just being lazy. Every time I felt lost, I told myself I was just being ungrateful. Every time I felt hurt, I told myself other people had it worse. I minimized my own pain so well that I eventually stopped taking it seriously. But pain that is ignored doesn't disappear. It waits, and it grows quietly in the background of your life. I kept running from one distraction to another. Work, noise, screens, endless scrolling, endless plans. Anything that helped me avoid sitting alone with my thoughts. Because when things became quiet, something inside me started to panic. I was afraid of what I might finally admit. That I wasn't okay, and that I didn't feel strong anymore, that I didn't know how to fix myself. And there was another truth I rarely allowed myself to face. I was deeply afraid of being ordinary. Not famous, not special, not remembered. Just another life that passes through the world unnoticed. I know this sounds small, but that fear was heavy. It whispered to me constantly, if you don't become something impressive, your life will not mean anything. And I believed it. So every failure felt personal. Every delay felt humiliating. Every closed door felt like confirmation that I was not enough. I started to carry a quiet shame everywhere I went. Not shame about something I had done. Shame about who I was. And over time, that shame slowly reshaped the way I saw myself. I stopped seeing a person with potential, but I started seeing a problem that needed to be fixed. And the more I tried to fix myself, the more broken I felt. I didn't notice it at the time, but my lowest point was not only emotional, it was spiritual. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped believing I was worth being helped. There was one night when all of that pressure finally caught up with me. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No argument. No bad news. No unexpected phone call. Just another ordinary day that quietly emptied whatever strength I had left. I came home exhausted in every possible way. My body was tired, but my mind felt completely overwhelmed. I sat down in my room and stared at the wall for a long time. Not thinking, not crying, just frozen. It was the kind of stillness that comes when your emotions finally run out of energy. And then, without planning to, I whispered something that shocked me. I can't keep doing this. Not this job, not this routine, Not this version of my life. This, being me, carrying my thoughts, carrying my fears, carrying my quiet disappointments. I realized something that night that hurt to admit. I had been trying to survive life without letting anyone truly see how heavy it was for me. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be complicated. I didn't want to need help. So I learned how to disappear emotionally while still being physically present. But that night, I couldn't pretend anymore. For the first time, I stopped trying to motivate myself. I stopped making promises about changing tomorrow. I stopped planning new routines. I stopped searching for another strategy to fix my life. And I simply sat there and accepted one terrifying truth. I had reached the limit of my own strength. And in that quiet room, with no audience and no performance left, I finally allowed myself to admit something I had been avoiding for years. I was not okay, not tired, not stressed, not confused, broken. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to hide it. I wasn't trying to explain it. I wasn't trying to fight it. I just let myself feel it, completely. And that surrender became the doorway to something I never expected. I wish I could tell you that the room suddenly filled with light. I wish I could say I heard a clear voice call my name. I wish I could describe something dramatic and unmistakably supernatural. But that is not how I met God. I met God in silence, in weakness, in emotional collapse, whilst I was sitting on the floor, my back against the wall, staring at nothing in particular. My thoughts were loud. My chest felt tight. My heart felt tired of beating with the same disappointment every day. And without rehearsing it, without preparing any spiritual words, something inside me finally gave up control. I didn't kneel, I didn't fold my hands, I didn't know how to pray properly. I simply spoke out loud, quietly, almost embarrassed by how simple it sounded. God, if you are real, I can't do this alone anymore. That was it. No speech, no theology, no performance, just honesty. I didn't expect an answer. I didn't expect comfort. I only expected the same silence I had learned to live with. But something changed, not around me, inside me. The noise in my head began to slow down, not disappear. Slow down. But my breathing became steady. My shoulders relaxed without me trying to relax them. And for the first time in a very long time, I was not fighting my own thoughts. It felt as if someone had entered the room, not physically, but personally, deeply, present. I can't fully explain it without sounding strange, but in that quiet moment, I felt understood, not analyzed, not judged, not measured. Understood. I felt safe in a way I had never felt safe with myself. And suddenly, a thought came to my mind. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. I didn't hear it with my ears. I felt it with my heart. And something inside me broke open, not with fear, but with relief, because in that fragile, exhausted, unguarded moment, I realized I was not invisible after all. I was seen. Whoa, and for the first time, I knew exactly where that feeling came from. I had met God, not in strength, not in confidence, but in surrender. At first, I questioned everything. I wondered if I was just emotionally overwhelmed. I wondered if my mind had created comfort because I desperately needed it. I wondered if it was simply a psychological response to finally admitting I was not okay. But what followed that moment slowly convinced me it was more than that. Nothing in my life immediately changed. My problems were still waiting for me the next morning. My responsibilities were still there. My uncertainties were still very real. But something inside me was different. The fear that usually controlled my decisions no longer felt as powerful. The constant pressure to fix my entire future suddenly felt smaller. But for the first time in years, my thoughts were not attacking me every second. There was space. Not empty space. Peaceful space. I stopped mentally rehearsing my failures. I stopped replaying conversations. I stopped preparing for rejection before it even happened. I was still imperfect, still insecure, still unsure, but I was no longer panicking about it, and that alone was new. I noticed something else as well. I no longer felt the urge to hide. I started being more honest with myself, more honest with God, more honest about what I could and could not carry. I began to talk to Him in the middle of ordinary moments, while walking, while sitting on the bus, while lying awake at night. Not formal prayers, just quiet thoughts, small sentences, simple questions, sometimes even complaints. And somehow, I didn't feel foolish doing it. I felt connected. That connection slowly changed the way I responded to pain. When disappointment came, I no longer collapsed internally. When fear returned, I no longer assumed it meant I was failing. When confusion showed up, I no longer believed it meant my life was broken. Something had shifted at the deepest level of how I understood myself. Before, I believed I had to earn my right to exist. Now I slowly started to believe I was already accepted. Not because I had improved, not because I had achieved anything, but because I belonged. And that realization could not be explained by logic alone. It was relational. It felt personal. It felt intentional. It felt like someone had stepped into my life, not to fix every problem, but to walk with me through them. That is how I knew. I hadn't just experienced relief. I had encountered God. One of the most important things I need to say to you is this. Meeting God did not magically solve my life. There was no sudden success, no instant confidence, no perfect emotional healing. The next day still came with responsibilities. The same people, the same environment, the same unfinished struggles. But I was different. Before, I faced my problems alone. Now I no longer felt abandoned inside them. God did not remove my fear. He reduced its power. God did not erase my past mistakes. He changed how I carried them. God did not suddenly give me a clear 5-year plan. He gave me enough peace to take the next small step. And that was enough. I learned something very slowly. God does not rescue us from reality. He enters it with us. But He does not replace our responsibility. He strengthens our courage. He does not take away every painful emotion. He teaches us how to sit with them without letting them destroy us. There were still nights when anxiety returned. There were still moments when I doubted myself. There were still moments when I felt behind in life. But the difference was this. I no longer believed those feelings defined who I was. I no longer believed my weakness made me unworthy. I no longer believed my confusion meant I was lost forever. I started to understand something deeply. God was not disappointed in me. He was patient with me. And that truth slowly rewired the way I talked to myself. The voice in my head became softer, less cruel, less demanding, less threatening. I stopped pushing myself with fear, but I started moving forward with trust. Not confidence in my ability, but confidence in His presence. And that changed everything. The change did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, almost unnoticed at first. I stopped running from silence. I stopped filling every empty moment with noise. I started allowing myself to slow down. Not because I had learned discipline, but because I no longer felt chased by my own thoughts. I became more honest about my limits. I stopped pretending I could handle everything alone. I started saying no without feeling guilty. I started resting without feeling lazy. I started admitting when something hurt instead of minimizing it. These were small changes, but they were real. And for the first time in a long time, they were sustainable. I also noticed how differently I spoke to myself. And before, every mistake was evidence that I was failing. Now, every mistake became something I could bring to God without shame. Not to excuse myself, but to learn, to grow, to heal. I stopped measuring my life only by outcomes. I started paying attention to who I was becoming. More patient, more gentle, more aware of other people's pain, more present. I found myself listening better, not just to others, to myself, to God, to the quiet movements inside my heart. And something else changed that surprised me. I stopped seeing my brokenness as something embarrassing. I started seeing it as the place where God met me, the place where grace entered my life, the place where I finally became honest. I realized that my lowest point was not wasted. It was not meaningless. It became the doorway to a deeper life. But not an easier life, a truer one. I did not become fearless. I became anchored. I did not become perfect. I became held. And that changed the way I walked into every ordinary day. If you are listening to this and you feel lost, I want you to know something very clearly. I am not speaking to you from a place of success. I am speaking to you from a place of survival, from the place where you finally stop pretending you are okay, from the place where your strength runs out, from the place where your questions become heavier than your answers. If your life feels messy right now, that does not mean you are failing. If your emotions feel overwhelming, that does not mean you are weak. If your future feels unclear, that does not mean you are late. You are human. You are allowed to struggle, but you are allowed to not have everything figured out. You are allowed to need help. I know what it feels like to think you should be further ahead, to think you wasted time, to think you disappointed yourself, to think you somehow missed your moment. But your life is not a race, and it is not a performance, and it is not an audition for worth. You are not behind. You are becoming. If you are exhausted from carrying everything alone, I want to invite you to try something very simple, not religious, not complicated, not impressive, just honest. In your own words, in your own way, say this quietly. God, if you are real, please meet me where I am. You do not need perfect faith. You do not need the right language. You do not need to clean your life first. You only need honesty. But because I promise you this, God is not waiting for you at the version of yourself you are trying to become. He meets you at the version of yourself you are right now. I never thought my lowest point would become the most meaningful place in my life. For a long time, I believed the worst season of my story was something I needed to hide, something to erase, something to be ashamed of. But now I see it differently. My lowest point was not proof that I had failed. It was proof that I had finally stopped pretending. It was the moment I stopped trying to save myself and allowed God to meet me in my weakness. I did not meet God when I became strong. I did not meet God when I became confident. I did not meet God when I finally had everything together. I met God when I had nothing left to offer, nothing left to prove, but nothing left to hide. Just my honesty, just my fear, just my tired heart. And that was enough. If you remember only one sentence from my story, let it be this: you do not have to become someone better before you come to God. You only have to become honest. Because I met God, not at my best, but at my lowest point. Before you close this video, I just want to leave you with one quiet thought. You don't have to wait for your life to fall apart before you turn to God. But if it already feels like it has, you are not too late. Your lowest point is not a mistake in your story. It can become the place where your story finally becomes honest. I used to believe I had to fix myself before I could come to God. Now I know. I came to God because I could not fix myself. And maybe that is not weakness. Maybe that is the beginning. Well, thank you for listening to my story. And if you are still here, still breathing, still searching, you are not alone. Not anymore. If this story meant something to you, you don't have to comment anything personal. You don't have to explain your pain. But if you want, you can simply let this video stay with you for a moment. And if you believe someone you know is quietly struggling right now, share this with them. Not to convince them, not to fix them, just to remind them they are not invisible, and neither are you.